The Divide. Chapter 1. The War Room. The conference room fell silent as Maya Chen slammed her laptop shut. Across the mahogany table, David Harrison's smirk widened, that infuriating expression she'd come to despise over 3 years of corporate warfare. "Let me get this straight," Maya said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You're telling me that my team's 18 months of research, our breakthrough algorithm, is somehow too aggressive for the market?" David leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "I'm saying that your approach lacks nuance. Perhaps if you'd consulted with someone who understands client psychology. Someone like you." Maya's laugh was sharp. The man who lost the Peterson account because he assumed their female CEO would respond better to softer messaging. The other executives shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't unusual. Maya and David's clashes had become legendary at Nexus Technologies. What had started as professional disagreement had evolved into something far more personal, a proxy war that seemed to embody every frustration their respective genders held about the other. David's jaw tightened. "At least I don't alienate half our workforce with my what?" Maya stood, her 5'4" frame somehow commanding the room. "My competence. My refusal to smile and nod while mediocre ideas get promoted because they come wrapped in the right packaging. Your inability to work as part of a team." David shot back, rising to meet her challenge. At 6'2", he towered over her, but Maya had never backed down from anyone. "Your assumption that every criticism is an attack on your gender rather than your judgment." The words hung in the air like a match dropped on gasoline. Maya felt the familiar fire in her chest, the same rage that had driven her to graduate summa cum laude from MIT, to patent 3 algorithms before age 30, to claw her way up in an industry that had questioned her belonging at every turn. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, and I use that term loosely, "you have a choice. You can back my proposal, which will revolutionize how this company approaches AI development, or you can continue to let your discomfort with a woman who doesn't apologize for her intelligence cost you millions in revenue." David's laugh was bitter. "There it is. The nuclear option. Disagree with Maya Chen, and you're automatically a sexist dinosaur. If the shoe fits." "Enough." The voice belonged to Sarah Martinez, the company's chief operating officer, who had been silent until now. "This is exactly why we're hemorrhaging talent. Half our female engineers have transferred to other divisions to avoid this toxic environment, and our male employees feel like they're walking on eggshells." Maya and David both turned to her, temporarily united in their surprise. Sarah continued, "You two have turned every boardroom into a battlefield. Maya, you're brilliant, but you assume every pushback is gender-based. David, your dismissive attitude toward ideas that challenge your worldview is exactly the kind of thinking that's killing innovation in tech." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You don't understand what it's like to, don't I?" Sarah's voice was steel. "I've been the only woman at the executive level for 5 years. I've watched talented people on both sides get caught in the crossfire of your personal war, and I'm done with it." David shifted uncomfortably. For the first time in months, he seemed to see beyond his immediate frustration with Maya. The room was full of brilliant people who had stopped contributing to meetings, afraid of being labeled or dismissed. "What are you suggesting?" Maya asked, though she sensed she wouldn't like the answer. "Joint leadership of the AI initiative," Sarah said. "You two will work together, or you'll both work somewhere else." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya stared at David, seeing not just her professional nemesis, but something more complex. A man whose own insecurities and assumptions had created blind spots as damaging as her defensive barriers. David met her gaze, and for a moment, she glimpsed something unexpected: uncertainty, vulnerability, the recognition that maybe they were both prisoners of a war neither had chosen to start. 6 months, Sarah said. "Prove that 2 of the smartest people I know can find a way to work together, or prove that some divides are too deep to bridge." As the other executives filed out, Maya and David remained seated across from each other, the mahogany table between them suddenly feeling less like a battlefield and more like a chasm they would have to learn to cross. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning to evolve into something neither of them understood. But for the first time in 3 years, Maya felt something besides anger when she looked at David Harrison. She felt curious about what lay beneath the assumptions, the defensiveness, the need to win at all costs. And that, she realized, was either the beginning of understanding or the most dangerous development yet. Chapter 2. After Hours. The elevator was broken. Of course it was. Maya stared at the out-of-order sign taped to the brushed steel doors, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. 15 floors. In heels. At 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night, when everyone with a life had gone home hours ago. Fantastic, she muttered, heading for the stairwell. She made it to the 7th floor before she heard footsteps echoing below her. Heavy, measured steps that she recognized despite herself. Maya paused on the landing, her hand gripping the rail. "Chun." David's voice carried up the concrete stairwell. She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to pretend she hadn't heard him. "Yeah," she called back, continuing her climb. His footsteps quickened. Within moments, he appeared on the landing below her, loosening his tie. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and she noticed dark circles under his eyes. "Working late on the Martinez ultimatum?" he asked, matching her pace as they climbed. Something like that. Maya's voice was neutral, professional, the way it had been in the 3 weeks since Sarah's bombshell. They'd been circling each other like wary cats, neither willing to make the first move toward collaboration. "Look, about this afternoon's meeting. You mean when you suggested my user interface was too masculine for the target demographic?" Maya didn't slow her pace. "Or when you implied that our female beta testers were just being overly emotional about the navigation issues?" David stopped climbing. "That's not what I said." Maya turned to face him from 2 steps up, which almost brought them to eye level. "What did you say then?" "I said the interface was intimidating to some users, and that the beta feedback suggested we needed to address user anxiety. I never mentioned gender. You didn't have to. User anxiety. Softer approach. More intuitive design." She made air quotes with each phrase. "We both know what that means in corporate speak." David's jaw worked silently for a moment. "Maybe I chose my words poorly, but the feedback was legitimate. The feedback was from 3 users out of 50, all from the same demographic, mid-level managers who've never used advanced AI tools. You want to redesign 18 months of work based on a sample size that wouldn't pass a high school statistics class. And you want to ignore user concerns because they don't fit your vision of how people should interact with technology." They stood facing each other in the stark fluorescent light of the stairwell, their voices echoing off concrete walls. Maya felt the familiar surge of frustration, but underneath it, something else. David looked genuinely tired, not just physically, but emotionally worn down. "Why are you even here this late?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. David blinked, caught off guard by the shift. "Same as you, I imagine. Trying to figure out how to make this partnership work before Sarah decides we're both liabilities." He resumed climbing, and Maya fell into step beside him. For several floors, they walked in silence. "Can I ask you something?" David said as they reached the 10th floor. Maya tensed. "Depends what it is. When did you decide I was the enemy?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She stopped walking. "What?" "I've been thinking about it, trying to pinpoint when our professional disagreements became this." He gestured between them. "Because I remember when you first joined the AI team. You were brilliant, obviously, but you also seemed to enjoy the work, the collaboration. You'd laugh at my terrible jokes in team meetings." Maya stared at him. She did remember that. The early days when David's presence didn't automatically trigger her defenses. When his questions about her algorithms felt like genuine curiosity rather than challenges to her competence. "The Steinberg presentation," she said quietly. "What?" "October 15th, 3 years ago. The Steinberg presentation." Maya continued up the stairs, David following. "I'd spent 2 months developing a predictive model for their supply chain. Revolutionary stuff. It would have saved them millions annually. I was supposed to present to their board. I remember. You were excited about it for weeks. Until the morning of the presentation, when Jim Morrison pulled me aside and told me that David Harrison would be supporting my presentation. That you'd handle the client-facing aspects while I focused on the technical details." David was quiet. "Do you remember what you said when I objected?" "Maya, you said, and I quote, 'It's not personal. You're brilliant with the tech stuff, but some clients respond better to a different presentation style.' You patted me on the shoulder and told me it was just business." David stopped climbing again. Maya could hear his breathing in the silence. "I never asked Morrison to do that," he said finally. But you didn't refuse either. No, I didn't. They reached the 12th floor. Maya's legs were burning, but she welcomed the physical discomfort. It was easier than the emotional territory they were navigating. I built that algorithm from scratch, she continued. I understood every variable, every edge case, every potential application. But I had to watch from the back of the room while you presented my work to a room full of executives who barely looked at me when you introduced me as your technical support. Maya, they asked questions about implementation that you couldn't answer. You kept looking back at me, expecting me to feed you responses while you took credit for concepts you didn't understand. And when Johnson asked about scalability issues, you gave him the completely wrong answer. I know, we lost the contract because of that answer. $23 million because the client-facing expert didn't understand the technology he was presenting. They climbed the remaining floors in silence. At the 15th floor landing, Maya paused with her hand on the door handle. That was the day I realized that no matter how good I was, there would always be someone ready to step in front of me. Someone who looked the part, sounded the part, fit the picture of what a tech leader should be. And that person would get the benefit of the doubt, while I'd have to prove myself again and again. David stood behind her, close enough that she could hear his breathing. I was wrong, he said quietly. Not just about the presentation, about everything. I told myself I was protecting you from difficult clients, helping you focus on what you were best at. But really, I was protecting myself. It was easier to handle the client interaction than to risk being overshadowed by someone clearly more qualified. Maya turned to face him. In the harsh fluorescent light, David looked older than his 34 years. The worst part, she said, is that I started to doubt myself. Started to think maybe I really wasn't good at the client side. Maybe I was just a code monkey who should stay in her lane. You're not. I know that now. But it took months to rebuild that confidence. And by then, I decided that the only way to survive was to fight for every scrap of recognition, every opportunity. Because if I didn't fight, men like you would keep taking them. Men like me, David repeated. Men who get promoted based on potential, while women get promoted based on proven results. Men who get called decisive for the same behavior that gets women labeled difficult. David was quiet for a long moment. I never thought about it that way. Why would you? The system works for you. Does it? David's voice was sharper now. Because from where I'm standing, I'm 34 years old with a reputation for being unable to work with the most talented person in my department. My last 3 projects have been mediocre because I've been so focused on proving I belong in rooms where everyone assumes I got there through politics rather than merit. Maya blinked. What do you mean? You think you're the only one dealing with assumptions? Half the company thinks I'm Morrison's golden boy, that I got promoted because I play golf with the right people. The other half thinks I'm threatened by working with women. I can't win. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying what remained of his professional styling. Maybe we're both prisoners of the same broken system, he continued, just locked in different cells. Maya studied his face, looking for the manipulation she'd learned to expect. Instead, she saw something that surprised her, genuine exhaustion. Not just physical tiredness, but the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting battles he wasn't sure how to win. So what do we do about it? She asked. David met her eyes. I honestly don't know. But maybe we start by admitting that this isn't working for either of us. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a crack in the armor she'd built around her resentment. The AI project launches in 5 months. 5 months to prove we can work together. Or 5 months to definitively prove we can't. David's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. No pressure. Despite herself, Maya felt her lips twitch in response. Come on. Let's get out of this stairwell before building security decides we're breaking in. As they walked through the door into the familiar chaos of the 15th floor, empty now except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew, Maya wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. But for the first time in 3 years, she was curious to find out. Chapter 3, The Proposal. You want to do what? Sarah Martinez stared at Maya and David across her desk, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. It was 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and Maya was already regretting their decision to present their idea so early in the day. A complete user study, Maya repeated. Real-world testing with diverse demographics. Not just our usual tech-savvy early adopters, but actual end users from different backgrounds, ages, experience levels. That's not the crazy part, Sarah said, setting down her mug. The crazy part is that you two are sitting in the same room without security present. What changed? Maya glanced at David, who was uncharacteristically fidgeting with his pen. They'd spent the weekend hammering out their proposal, meeting in neutral territory, a coffee shop in Berkeley where neither of them was likely to run into colleagues. The conversations had been tense, frequently frustrating, but surprisingly productive. We realized we were fighting the wrong war, David said finally. Our personal issues were sabotaging the project, and ultimately, that hurts the company and the users we're trying to serve. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And you've resolved your personal issues? We've agreed to set them aside, Maya corrected. At least professionally. The user study makes sense from a business perspective, David continued. Maya's right that our beta testing was too narrow. If we're going to create AI tools for mainstream adoption, we need to understand how different people actually interact with the technology. Maya felt a flicker of surprise at the acknowledgement. And David's right that user experience matters as much as functionality. The most elegant algorithm in the world is useless if people can't figure out how to use it. This is disturbing, Sarah muttered. You're both being reasonable. It's unnatural. The study would take 6 weeks, Maya continued. We'd recruit participants from different industries, age ranges, technical backgrounds. David would handle the user experience research. I'd focus on the technical optimization based on real usage patterns. Playing to your respective strengths, Sarah nodded slowly. What's the catch? David and Maya exchanged a look. We want complete autonomy over the study design and implementation, Maya said. No interference from Morrison or the executive committee. No predetermined outcomes or political considerations. And if the results challenge our current assumptions about the product? Sarah asked. Then we pivot, David said. Even if it means starting over. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. You realize this is a massive risk. If you're wrong about the market readiness, if the study reveals fundamental flaws in the concept, then we'll have learned something valuable before we invested millions in a product that would fail anyway, Maya said. And if you two kill each other before the study is complete? We won't, David said, with more confidence than Maya felt. Sarah leaned back in her chair. I want weekly progress reports. Joint reports, not separate ones. I want to see evidence that you're actually collaborating, not just dividing up tasks and avoiding each other. Agreed, Maya said. And if this blows up, if you go back to the toxic dynamic that's been poisoning our team environment, you're both gone. No second chances, no appeals to HR, no mediation. Gone. Understood, David said. Sarah stood up, extending her hand. Then you have 6 weeks to prove that two brilliant, stubborn people can create something better together than they ever could apart. 2 hours later, Maya stood in the middle of the 15th floor's largest conference room, surveying the chaos. Whiteboards covered every wall, marked with flowcharts, user personas, and technical specifications. David was across the room, arguing with someone from facilities about network access for their testing lab. No, not just Wi-Fi, he was saying, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining something for the third time. We need dedicated bandwidth for real-time data analysis. If the connection lags during user sessions, we won't get accurate behavioral data. Maya found herself impressed despite her best efforts. David might not understand the intricacies of machine learning algorithms, but he clearly knew his way around user research methodology. Chun, the voice belonged to Marcus Webb, one of the senior developers on Maya's team. He approached with the cautious expression of someone navigating a potential minefield. Is it true you're working with Harrison now? Temporarily, Maya said. For the user study. Marcus glanced toward David, who was now sketching network diagrams on a whiteboard. How's that going? Too early to tell. Just be careful, okay? I know you can handle yourself, but Harrison's got a reputation for taking credit when things go well and assigning blame when they don't. Maya studied Marcus's face. He was genuinely concerned, she realized. Not gossiping or stirring up drama, but worried about her professionally. Thanks, she said. I'll keep that in mind. After Marcus left, Maya found herself watching David more carefully. Was he grandstanding for the facilities team, or did he genuinely care about getting the technical details right? When he caught her looking, he walked over. Problem, he asked. Marcus seems to think you have a tendency to claim credit for collaborative work. David's expression tightened. And what do you think? Maya considered the question. I think your track record speaks for itself, but I also think people can change. Generous of you. Practical of me. If you screw me over on this project, Sarah will fire us both. That's not exactly an incentive for betrayal. David almost smiled. True. Mutually assured destruction. Plus, Maya added, if you try to take credit for my work, I'll destroy you professionally. And I have documentation for everything. This time, David did smile, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. I wouldn't expect anything less. Maya felt an unexpected flutter of something. Attraction? Impossible. This was David Harrison, her professional nemesis. The embodiment of everything wrong with corporate tech culture. But the man smiling at her didn't look like a nemesis. He looked like someone she might actually enjoy working with. Dangerous territory. We should talk about participant recruitment, she said, deliberately refocusing on business. Right. I was thinking we start with Maya. David. Sarah's voice cut across the room. She stood in the doorway with two people Maya didn't recognize. A woman in an expensive suit and a man with the kind of aggressive posture that screamed executive. I'd like you to meet Janet Morrison from the board of directors and Thomas Chun, no relation, from Morrison Industries. Maya's blood ran cold. Morrison Industries was their biggest potential client, and Janet Morrison was Jim Morrison's sister. This wasn't a casual visit. We're very interested in your AI project, Janet Morrison said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Thomas here represents a consortium of companies looking for exactly the kind of innovative solutions you're developing. Maya glanced at David, who looked as uncomfortable as she felt. The project is still in development, David said carefully. We're just beginning the user research phase. Of course, Thomas Chen said, but we understand you've made significant breakthroughs in predictive algorithms. Our clients are eager to see early demonstrations. Maya's mind raced. They wanted a preview, probably to steal the concepts and develop them internally. It was a classic corporate maneuver, and one that could kill their project before it really began. I'm afraid that's not possible, she said. The algorithms aren't ready for external review. Surely a brief overview, Janet Morrison began, would be premature and potentially misleading. David interrupted smoothly. We're committed to delivering a fully tested, validated product. Anything less would be a disservice to your clients. Maya stared at him. David Harrison, defending her work, refusing a powerful client's request to protect the integrity of their research. Who was this man, and what had he done with her nemesis? I see. Janet Morrison's smile grew colder. Well, we'll be very interested in your progress reports. Sarah, I trust you'll keep us informed. Of course, Sarah said, but her tone suggested she was as wary as Maya felt. After the visitors left, the three of them stood in uncomfortable silence. Well, Sarah said finally, looks like you have an audience for your user study. No pressure. Maya met David's eyes across the room. For the first time since Sarah's ultimatum, she realized they weren't just fighting for their careers anymore. They were fighting for their work, their integrity, and possibly for each other. The war between them was over. The real battle was just beginning.